What's a game you badly wanted to come out but didn't? Kind of relevant. I wish that EA let Westwood Studios to continue to make great Command & Conquer games. C&C Renegade failed commercially. While there still were good C&C games made by EA, I wish that Westwood was still in creative control of C&C. EA eventually tried to do too much with the game and it wasn't the same. Silent Hills would have been a game that sold itself. Hideo Kojima, Guillermo del Toro and Norman Reedus all working together was one of the best match-ups I'd ever seen to make a game together, but no. It had to be cancelled so Konami could give us more fucking pachinko machines. Well fucking done, Konami. Oh man. Silent Hills looked like it was shaping up to be the most terrifying game of all time. The developers wanted to blur the lines of reality and have the characters in the game text their phone. Creepy shit. Silent Hill 2 and 3 together are just insane, the atmosphere and the scares. The original game is great too, and airy for how the shitty graphics help make things look even more wrong, but 2's depressive atmosphere, with all the mold, the tarps covering shit, all the gray and green and blue, all the water, it really feels unique. 3's atmosphere is more classic, visceral and bloody, but it still excels with shit like the entire hilltop center, the mannequin room, blocked-off wheelchair, the body holding a doll, the mold, those aggressive footsteps, the wheelchair by the elevator. Portal 2 was such a leap forward from the first game, brand new game mechanics, significantly increased puzzle complexity, deeper story, sassier GLaDOS, etc. Seeing how Valve was able to build something that felt so fresh but also like a logical evolution of the first game was incredible. I want that feeling again. He makes soundtracks for other games, too, like the Tales and Star Ocean games. I like his work on Exist Archive. He's also going to be collabing with someone else on Didnt Chronicle. So, ever since I was a kid I've seen that game at Blockbuster and the like, and I'm always so close to grabbing it, then decide on something else instead. Did it age well? Is it still worth playing? For the record, I don't like GTA games and that's what turns me away from trying it is everyone comparing the two. But I did enjoy Red Dead Redemption, the first. So what do you think? I haven't played it in years so I may not be the best judge of whether it holds up well, but I'd say it's much more than a GTA clone, since it deals with preteen characters in a boarding school setting. It has his more intimate atmosphere and it's more whimsical than GTA could be. I definitely see why people compare them in terms of gameplay mechanics and some of the edgelord traits they have in common, but Bully does its own thing and feels like a special, unique game. The storylines in Stir are a lot more solid than you'd expect from an MMO and it can totally be played fully single player. Mind you, KOTOR 3 is still the answer I would have added to his thread myself, but I'd still suggest playing through the class stories in Stir if you haven't yet done so. I'm aware that a lot of it can be completed single player. I suppose I should clarify that it's the single player style I enjoy in KOTOR, a similar style to like say Skyrim or such. It being single player also allowed for other charming things such as its iconic combat system that Splitter just seems to have scrapped. That and also Splitter introduces a lot of MMO aspects that take away a lot of the charming story experience, like grinding equipment. Splitter is an MMO to the core, even if it can be played single player the style of game is totally different. So the other day I wondered if there was going to be a new Unreal Tournament. I loved the original when I was a kid and wanted to maybe play a new one if it was coming out. Turns out, because Fortnite became so successful, Epic Games said fuck that. We don't need no stinking Unreal anymore. Now I'm kinda sad. The 10-year anniversary of the cancellation was 5 days ago. There's a Facebook group that kind of keeps the dream alive, but they're just reminiscing in circles in the end. Godspeed, Megaman. I want a new and famous game, but I want them go back to fictional cities that are analogous to real ones. Seattle was cool, but it felt almost weird being in a real place. It feels like they're ignoring a table full of money by neglecting this franchise. Anthem 2.0, the base combat and flying mechanics of awesome flying suits was so good. It was just item economy, coherent story, and general game focus it was lacking. Obviously the development it went through lead to these problems, but I truly hoped for a fun looter shooter with those base combat mechanics. Xenosaga like 6 I think. I never played the Xenosaga games, but Xenogears is one of my all-time favorites. I remember reading in a gaming magazine when I was in middle school that Xenosaga games would eventually get to Xenogears in the story and basically remake to modern standards of the time. We'll probably never get a remake now since the team is with Nintendo and Square owns the rights. I wanted Xenosaga to be the full 6 volumes, but it was condensed into 3. I also wanted the remaster, but not enough support was there for it. I love that series so much. The first is still the best, second had many weaknesses but still alright, and the third was exciting. I wanted Dead Island 2. It was supposed to come out in 2014 but went to an indefinite stagnation. It may still be released, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It has the dumbest characters and dumbest storyline, but god dang the gameplay is so fun. There was a Chocobo racing game that had all kinds of styles of chocobos, from flesh and blood birds to a Magitech unit akin to the one from FFVI. It was mostly concept art in the 90s, around the time EGM was pimping a game called Akuji the Heartless, and I'm not sure if I'm experiencing the Mandela effect merely talking about it, but the concepts looked so damned cool and both never came to fruition. I thought True Fantasy Live Online on the original Xbox looked like the absolute shit. I was bummed that it became vaporware. That said, these companies aren't going to invest millions into a game and not ship it if it's even remotely worthwhile to release. A Star Wars game about Boba Fett as a kid. I think it was called Star Wars 1313 or something like that. Unfortunately, it was cancelled after Disney bought the Star Wars trademark and cancelled that, as well as a Darth Maul game, and made all the spin-off stuff non-canon. Honestly, when I was younger and around when Saga just came out, I so badly wanted a game like that to come out. Not even the VR stuff, just a cool game that had close similarities to how the game in that show was. Sadly, the only one that I've found that shared close similarities to it has been FF Online and Valheim of all games. A Xenosaga Remastered Collection. Only the second game out of the 3 here in Europe, and there has been no way of legally playing them, but last year any hopes were shut down because it was deemed not profitable. The Mandate. The trailer looked really interesting. It seemed like it was going to be a hybrid space combat sim/RPG/ship management game set in the Russian Civil War in space. Turned out to be vaporware, though. You know how Super Mario U Deluxe on the Switch is basically the latest iteration of 2D Mario platformers? It's like the great-grandchild of Super Mario World on the SNES. I want that, but with Donkey Kong Country. I want the second L.A. War but set in 1970s LA. I think there's so much potential in a 1970s L.A. environment for a detective game. Cults. The rising porn industry, the overall disco punk vibe. Probably never gonna happen though, after all the trouble that was developing the first one. Call me a child or immature or whatever, but I am disappointed Disney Infinity 4.0 was cancelled. I have literally every Star Wars figure, and I really wish we could have had 4.0. RIP Disney Infinity, you will be missed, along with Skylanders. I want a new Tenchu game. We had Tenchu, Return from Darkness and Tenchu Z, but that was it. I like the gameplay of stealth kills and trap setting, multiple ways of getting to your target, bonus stuff for all stealth kills, unlockable techniques. Closest thing we got was Sekiro, but even then, you didn't get poison rice balls, or poison blow darts. NFS, Underground 3, imagine the visual polish of NFS 2015, but with the detail of NFS 2, add in a shadow of more direct opponent, reputation system and you have yourself a gripping arcade racer with gorgeous visuals. Legacy of Kain, Dead Sunday. I just want that series to come back intact. Dead Sun supposedly was to revolve around something like what Regiel became. And I want to see an engine that can generate physical and spectral versions of the same open world. I miss my Mind Fox, absolutely glorious voice acting, and just sublime writing. Post-corruption Nosgoth made me feel the dread and desolation that followed but vampires and shit. When I was a kid, middle school I think, I was so in love with Yandir Sim and I thought it would only be a couple more years before it came out. Now, I fucking despise Yandev and couldn't care less if it came out or not. End of Nations. It was an RTS game with sci-fi elements. I got to participate in the beta for a little while, then they just closed the beta and gave up on it. I assume Gestrian had bigger and better plans. Dinosaur Planet for the N64. I was super excited for it, and followed development on it from the start all the way up until they finally said it wasn't going to happen. 95% of it was reused as Star Fox Adventure for the GameCube, but it always felt weird to play after following Dinosaur Planet so closely. Side note, I still did enjoy Star Fox Adventure, even if it felt weird since it was neither a traditional Star Fox game, not Dinosaur Planet. I know the game technically came out, but Cube World. I bought the alpha day one in 2013 and then waiting years until the beta came out on Steam. It was a disappointment in every way. It regressed from the alpha in many ways. After the negative response the developers stopped pushing updates again, so it will likely remain unfinished forever. See. I can't remember the name of the game, but it was advertised a few years back. It was almost like a life simulator or something. You could hold jobs and wall around the city, but the cool part to me was the insane customization you could do to the house you ended up living in. I haven't heard anything about it in years and as far as I know it never released. One that was supposed to come out, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 3. It was half finished and somewhere funding was lost or something. The end of the second game left with the spooky cliffhanger. D4 Dark Dreams Don't Lie. Back then it looked like a super fun game, but the developer didn't want to release more of the game until it got famous enough or something along those lines. I wonder what happened to it. Routine. There's like less than 1,000 of us still sitting in a dead sub waiting for anything. Last news was 4 years ago saying it's coming soon. It's basically a survival horror set in an abandoned space station with 80s 90s themed sci-fi, first person, robots, darkness, silence in space. I waited for years for Borderlands to come out. The original concept was scrapped though BC current-gen consoles couldn't handle it. It was then introduced as the cartoon version we know and love today when it was originally serious and looked more like real life. Don't get me wrong, I love TH series, but I'm more in the original idea. Command & Conquer Generals 2 at the time when it was busy with players from the base game. Someone created a mod with Red Alert 3 recently. They rebuilt the whole thing. The original Tom Clancy Ghost Recon from the Ubisoft reveal way back when was amazing. The game they actually released under the same name was completely different from what was shown at the reveal. A few years ago, there was a Kickstarter for a game called Topia. It was a retro graphics MMO where players also played the monsters. If you got a certain monster up to a certain level, it unlocked new monsters. I backed it for a few bucks, but it never materialized. The rest of the Two Human trilogy, the setting and characters and art design was so interesting, but the camera controls were so bad. I genuinely believe that if the studio hadn't gotten fucked over by EA, or fucked over EA, whichever happened, the second and third game would have been vast improvements. Routine, basically System Shock meets Alien Isolation, originally had a release date of April 2013 before it was eventually pushed as far back as March of 2017. The developer has been on radio silence since. Beyond Good and Evil 2, this game hasn't been cancelled yet and is still coming out. However, it was originally supposed to come out not long after the original came in 2003, but poor sales of the first game led to it being heavily delayed. Then there was a trailer for it in 2008, but it got delayed yet again. There was finally another trailer at E3 2017, but by then, Ubisoft had decided to make the game a prequel. 4 years later, how has it been that long? And it still looks like the game will take a few more years, 2023 at the earliest. If it was going to come out when it originally was a long time ago, it would be a sequel instead of a prequel and would probably have been released on the Xbox 360/PS3 consoles. Now it looks like it's going to be released on Xbox Series X/PS5 consoles. Oh my god. At one point they were making an esports multiplayer version of the fantastic Saga. Xbox Classic Phantom Dust was close to being finished. Then Microsoft stopped funding it. Would have been incredible. Also there was a multiplayer spin-off to the Legacy of Kain series called Sons of Nosgoth that was really far along. Also would have been incredible. Hopefully they exist in some alternate reality because this universe got dropped. The Last Night looked really appealing, but after so many delays, we are now 3 or 4 years after its initial release date and there hasn't been any word from the developers. On a brighter note, the upcoming game Replaced has a very similar aesthetic and actually looks more appealing. Chrono Trigger 2, and no, Chrono Cross doesn't count. That's a great game in its own right but is a convoluted mess and has nothing to do with time travel. I want a real sequel to Chrono Trigger. It's abysmal that what is largely considered the greater JRPG of all time doesn't have a sequel. They were making a Command & Conquer 3 spin-off called Tiberium. It was going to be a shooter, and you could call in these towers on top of Tiberium deposits and it would increase your resources and give you access to call-in squads of units to help you in combat. I always loved playing shooter games, and having large amounts of allies. Super Bomberman Remastered, but instead they did Bomberman R in recent graphic and 3D really beautiful graphics, but I kind of want the real Super Nintendo Bomberman old graphics to come out on every console. Not quite, but kinda. I remember when I first heard about Borderlands in some magazine. It was a gritty shooter that sounded like you could reslot the random bits of guns together to make monstrosities. I wasn't disappointed by Borderlands, but it definitely ended up an entirely different style by the time it came out. I may be wrong, but I feel like years ago Squaresoft, or maybe it was Square Enix by then, trademarked the name Chrono Break. Chrono Cross was the first game I ever played on PlayStation and then I went back and found Chrono Trigger and it's the only game I've ever beaten multiple times on multiple systems. I was so hyped for another Chrono game. In the Valley of Gods, I wanted it so bad after Firewatch, but the developer was bought out by Valve and the dev team splintered into different projects at Valve. They say it could still come at some point, but I don't think it ever will. Mirror's Edge, saying that the franchise only has 2 games, one being like a remake or something. The only real lore we get is from the comics. Feels like there is a lot of potential with this franchise, but DICE and EA kinda shoved it under the rug. It was a really unique game that wasn't ever really done before. Edit, forgot about Edge Too Deep, but I mean, does that really count? There was once a first-person Red Alert, kinda like Battlefield. Not sure if it ever came out, but it would have been young meta game for life, and maybe controversial given recent news, but StarCraft Ghost.